Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're counting down our picks for the SoulsBorne bosses that let us down, let the genre down, but most importantly, let themselves down.
Before we begin, we publish new content all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
Royal Rat Authority, Dark Souls 2. There's not a Souls fan on this planet that enjoys bosses whose difficulty rests not on its moveset, but the amount of minions it spawns to do the dirty work for them. And they don't come dirtier than this pack of vermin. The large rat certainly packs a bite, but the worst thing about it is the sheer number of smaller rats that surround it, all ready to inflict a poison status effect on the player. Enjoy your kingdom of rat droppings, you jerks. Godskin Duo, Elden Ring. There's an art to a 2-on-1 SoulsBorne boss fight. Everything has to be finely tuned. The two bosses in question need to complement one another, and there still needs to be options that the players can exploit as to not get overwhelmed. Then there's the Godskin Duo. Two previous bosses slapped together, stuffed into a tight arena, with health bars all over the place. It's so mismatched and so aggravating that there's no shame in busting out the spirit ashes to level the playing field. Prowling Magus and Congregation, Dark Souls 2. Fair warning, there's going to be a lot of Dark Souls 2 bosses here, and how can there not be when they're offering up slop like this? In a long line of bosses that should have been just regular enemies, we've got this gaggle of inept monsters that aren't so much challenging as they are target practice. Sure, a couple of the Congregation can throw bolts of magic, but they're easily avoided. The lumbering undead are as basic as it gets, whereas the Magus barely lasts a minute when you start hacking and slashing. Well, that was a waste of time. Folding Screen Monkeys, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. We get what they were going for here. We do. It just would have been cool if this were an actual boss battle, as opposed to a game of hide, seek and slaughter. Each of the three monkeys are masters at disguising themselves, which means instead of focusing on combat, you're grappling around the arena in search of them. There are clues to assist you, sure, but that doesn't take away how aggravating it can be lunging around on what feels like a wild goose chase. Needless to say, we were happy the ordeal was over when we made a shinobi shish kebab out of the last primate. Covetous Demon, Dark Souls 2. One of the most uninspired bosses to ever dump itself into the Souls franchise, the Covetous Demon is known for two things: throwing its weight around and being way too easy for an undead to cut into. Sure, you can get careless and there's a chance you'll get caught under all that demonic girth, but even then, the fight itself just feels lazy when compared to every other hellish monster that has come before and after. Speedrunning through this boss feels more like a mercy than an accomplishment. Moonlight Butterfly, Dark Souls. There's no shortage of airborne enemies to overcome across the Souls series, though most of them allow for some way for the player to land a hit. But not this behemoth of a bug, at least not at first. Unless you're primed with magic, it's going to be impossible to strike at the butterfly, while it in turn will continually barrage you until it decides to casually lean in, finally allowing you to strike back. Stage the whole thing on a bridge, and you've got a recipe for one aggravating boss that melee builds quickly learn to despise. Ancient Dragon, Dark Souls 2. Out of all the dragons ever conjured up by FromSoft, none have infuriated players more than this withered lizard. Given that it barely moves and just breathes fire, you'd think it would make for a rather easy brawl. It is not. For one, the Ancient Dragon's health pool is enormous, making it the spongiest of damage sponges. All the while its fire breath completely covers the area to an outrageous extent, made all the worse since it attacks from off screen. It's an arduous encounter, with the only positive aspect being that it's entirely optional. Mikolash, host of the nightmare, Bloodborne.
No one can catch us. No one can stop us now.
You know you're the weak link in a chain when we'd rather take on eldritch horrors of every shape and sort than one dude with a cage on his head. What makes Mikolash so awful isn't the breadth of his attacks or a giant health pool, it's the fact he keeps running away. Get him 1 or 2 good hits and he'll skedaddle down one of the numerous hallways, leading you on a wild chase, on and on, rinse and repeat, until you finally finish him off. Next time, leave the hosting duties to someone who can actually hold their own. Twin Dragon Riders, Dark Souls 2. What's worse than a highly forgettable, poor excuse for a boss fight featuring a slow-moving, tanky armored knight that's just an oversized standard enemy? The exact same thing, only now there's 2 of them! The Dragon Rider was already one of the lamest bosses to ever emerge from behind a fog door, but copying and pasting another one ensured that these 2 would go down as the worst double boss fight in SoulsBorne history. The Bed of Chaos, Dark Souls. The first Dark Souls game is many things. A landmark title, a shift in the medium, the bedrock that would inspire numerous Souls-likes for years to come. You know what it isn't? A platformer! Which sucks because this boss demands that your chosen undead bounce around the arena like Super Mario. The Bed of Chaos is infamous for how it has players trying to navigate the right path in order to reach the boss's core. Something that can only be accomplished by making leaps of faith that don't always work out. Which of these bosses do you truly despise? Let us know in the comments.
Check out these other great clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.